Ladies and gentlemen, you know there comes a point in a woman's life when she's walked enough miles to know what she stands for. A woman of God in her later years has carried burdens, celebrated victories, and seen the seasons change more times than most can imagine. But hear me when I say this, no matter how many candles are on your birthday cake, there are some things you must never, ever tolerate. First, you don't tolerate disrespect. You don't let anybody, whether it's family, friends, or strangers, talk down to you like you don't matter. Because you do matter, you are a daughter of the Most High, and your worth is not up for negotiation. Second, you never tolerate neglect of your purpose. Just because you're older doesn't mean your calling has an expiration date. God is still working through you. He's still putting breath in your lungs because there's more for you to do, more lives to touch, more wisdom to pass on. Third, you never tolerate spiritual complacency. This is not the time to get comfortable. This is the time to lean in closer to God, to keep that fire burning in your soul, to keep learning, keep praying, keep praising, because your faith is what will carry you through every storm yet to come. And lastly, you never tolerate negative influences. You've earned the right to say, no, I don't need that drama in my life. You protect your spirit like it's the most precious treasure, because it is. So when you stand tall, when you speak up, when you walk away from what insults your soul, you're not just doing it for you. You're doing it for every woman watching you, every young girl who needs to see what dignity looks like. Keep your standards high, your faith strong, and your heart open. You're a woman of God, and nothing about that ever grows old. Never tolerate disrespect, because when you allow even a small measure of it, you open the door for your spirit to be slowly diminished. Disrespect often doesn't appear as some loud or obvious offense. Sometimes it's subtle, like a dismissive glance when you speak, a sarcastic tone when you share your thoughts, or a careless attitude toward your time and presence. Other times it shows up in more direct ways, like criticism meant to wound rather than build, or words designed to remind you of past failures instead of acknowledging your worth. A woman of God must remember that her dignity is not something handed to her by other people. It is anchored in who God says she is. You were created in His image, formed intentionally, and blessed with purpose. When you accept disrespect, you are agreeing, even if silently, that someone else's opinion of you has more weight than the value God has already assigned to you. If you let disrespect settle into your relationships, it will quietly erode your confidence. You'll find yourself questioning whether your feelings are valid or whether your needs deserve to be met. You'll second guess your right to set boundaries, to say no, or to expect common courtesy. That's exactly how the enemy works. Not necessarily through loud attacks, but through small, persistent compromises that wear down your sense of self-respect. Disrespect can also become a pattern that seeps into your own self-talk. When you hear the same demeaning words enough times, you may start to echo them to yourself, believing you aren't good enough, that you're too old to matter, or that you should simply accept whatever treatment you're given. That is a lie. It is a lie that keeps you from rising into your purpose, from feeling the joy of being fully loved and accepted. You must make a conscious decision that disrespect is not something you will accommodate, no matter who it comes from. Whether it is a family member who thinks they can take advantage of your patience, a friend who treats your kindness as weakness, or someone in your community who underestimates your wisdom, you are not obligated to stay silent or to keep peace at the cost of your self-respect. It is not ungodly to confront harmful behavior. It is not unkind to walk away from people who refuse to honor your humanity. Jesus himself never tolerated those who disrespected the sacredness of others. He spoke the truth. He set boundaries. He called out hypocrisy. He did not compromise his mission to accommodate those who would diminish it. When you decide that disrespect has no place in your life, you set a powerful example for everyone around you. Younger women watching you will learn that age is not a reason to shrink back. They will see that it is possible to grow older with grace, but also with strength. They will learn that respect is not something you beg for. It is something you embody and expect. You teach people how to treat you by the standards you uphold. If you consistently allow disrespect, it becomes an unspoken permission for it to continue. But when you stand your ground and say, "This is not acceptable," you redefine the boundaries of every relationship. There is a difference between humility and submission to mistreatment. Humility means you don't think you're better than others, but it never means you think less of yourself. As a woman of God, you are called to love others, but you are not called to abandon your own worth. You are called to forgiveness does not require you to endure abuse. You can release bitterness without giving people unlimited access to your heart. Disrespect is not a burden you have to carry. It is a problem others must own. And if they refuse to correct it, you have the freedom to protect your peace and walk away. Never tolerating disrespect doesn't mean you meet every offense with anger or hostility. Sometimes it means calmly and clearly expressing how someone's words or actions have hurt you. Sometimes it means limiting your interactions, keeping a polite but firm distance. Other times it means ending the relationship altogether. Each situation requires discernment, but the principle remains: you are not required to be a doormat in order to prove your goodness. God does not ask you to sacrifice your dignity for someone else's comfort. People will often test your boundaries to see how much you are willing to accept. If you allow small slights, those slights will grow into larger violations. If you excuse disrespect as harmless or unintentional, you may find yourself carrying resentment that poisons your heart over time. Setting clear boundaries is an act of love for yourself and for others. It gives people the opportunity to rise to a higher standard. It clarifies what is expected and what will no longer be tolerated. It also frees you from the emotional burden of trying to manage other people's behavior. You are not responsible for fixing someone else's lack of respect. You are only responsible for deciding how you will respond to it. It's important to remember that disrespect can come in many forms. It can be obvious insults or more covert manipulation. It can be being ignored, patronized, or controlled. It can be in the way someone interrupts you, talks over you, or dismisses your contributions. It can be jokes at your expense, criticism masked as concern, or pressure to tolerate treatment that undermines your sense of self. All of these behaviors are forms of disrespect, and none of them are acceptable. You may feel pressure to stay silent because you don't want to cause conflict or because you fear losing a relationship. But peace built on the foundation of disrespect is not peace at all. It is a fragile truce that costs you your joy, your confidence, and your voice. The real conflict happens within your heart when you betray your own values to keep someone else comfortable. You deserve relationships where you are valued, honored, and respected. You deserve to feel safe and cherished. Choosing not to tolerate disrespect is an act of courage. It requires you to trust that God will sustain you, even if standing firm means losing people who cannot honor you. It requires you to believe that your worth is unshakable, regardless of anyone else's opinion. It requires you to be willing to stand alone if necessary, knowing that your integrity is worth more than approval. You are not alone in this. God is with you. He will strengthen you. He will guide you. He will surround you with people who see your worth and treat you accordingly. When you honor yourself, you honor the one who created you. When you insist on respect, you declare that you are a vessel of God's love and a reflection of his image. You are not here to be diminished or demeaned. You are here to fulfill a purpose, to share your gifts, to inspire others by the way you live and love. Never tolerating disrespect is not about pride or arrogance. It is about walking in the fullness of your God-given identity. Even when it is difficult, even when your voice shakes, even when others misunderstand your boundaries, stand firm. You have spent a lifetime becoming the woman you are today. Your experiences, your wisdom, your faith have shaped you into someone worthy of honor. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Never tolerate neglect of your purpose, because your purpose is not a season that comes and goes with age, nor is it something that can be dismissed simply because life has become familiar or routine. Purpose is the divine assignment that God has woven into the very fabric of your being. And it does not expire when the world stops noticing or applauding. Many women reach a point in their lives where they have spent decades caring for others, building homes, serving in churches, and pouring out love until they feel emptied out. They look around and wonder if the best parts of their contribution are behind them. And in that quiet place of uncertainty, the temptation arises to believe that what God has called you to do no longer matters, This is a lie that must be rejected. Your purpose is not tethered to your youth, your energy level, or your role in other people's lives. It is anchored in your identity as a child of God, and it remains just as vital in your later years as it was when you first discovered it. Neglecting your purpose often begins subtly. You get busy meeting everyone else's needs and start telling yourself that you will return to your dreams and callings when things settle down. Days turn into weeks, weeks into years, and before you know it, you have put your own God-given mission on the shelf to gather dust. Perhaps you used to write, teach, encourage, or lead. Maybe you once felt a holy passion to serve the lonely, to mentor young women, or to be a voice of wisdom in your community. When you neglect those stirrings in your spirit, you slowly disconnect from the deepest part of who you are. You may keep busy doing good things, but if you are not doing the thing God specifically put you here to do, there will always be an ache inside you that no amount of distraction can numb. Some people will tell you that it is noble to give up your own calling so others can flourish. They will call it humility, sacrifice, or maturity. But in truth, letting your purpose die to make other people comfortable is not a virtue. It is a form of surrendering to fear or guilt. God does not ask you to bury your gifts under a pile of obligations that he never assigned you. He asks you to steward them faithfully. There is room for your purpose and your service to others. You do not have to choose between fulfilling your calling and caring for the people you love. In fact, when you are fully alive in your purpose, you become an even greater blessing to everyone around you. Neglecting your purpose can look like telling yourself that your contribution is no longer needed, that younger people have more energy, that the world has moved on, or that you've already done enough. But the truth is that the longer you walk with God, the richer your wisdom becomes and the more powerful your testimony grows. You have endured storms, witnessed miracles, and gained insights that no one else can replicate. Your purpose flows out of everything God has brought you through. If you silence it because you feel tired or overlooked, you are denying the very thing he has prepared you to release into the world. Another way neglect shows up is by allowing fear of judgment or failure to keep you small. You may fear that you will not be as effective as you once were, that your skills have grown rusty, or that you will not be received well. But God never called you to be perfect. He called you to be faithful. He doesn't measure your worth by how flawless your execution is, but by your willingness to show up and pour out what he has entrusted to you. Every time you step into your purpose, you are saying yes to God's plan, even if your voice trembles or your hands shake. It is also easy to neglect your purpose because of comparison. You may look at others who are doing similar work and convince yourself that there is no need for your voice. But comparison is a thief. It will rob you of the joy and peace that come from embracing your unique calling. No one else has lived your life or learned your lessons. No one else has your exact blend of gifts, personality, and experiences. That means no one else can fulfill your purpose in the way you can. If you withhold your contribution because you think someone else can do it better, you deprive the world of something only you were designed to give. Sometimes neglect is simply the result of fatigue and discouragement. You have tried and poured yourself out, but you didn't see the results you hoped for. You feel like your efforts have been in vain. And you start believing that your purpose no longer has a place in this season of life. But purpose is not measured by visible outcomes alone. Sometimes God uses your obedience in ways you will never see. Sometimes the seeds you plant today will bloom long after you are gone. Your role is to keep sowing, to keep trusting that he is doing something eternal through your faithfulness. Neglecting your purpose is not only a disservice to yourself, it is a disservice to the generations watching you. There are people who need the example of someone who refuses to settle into resignation and complacency. When you keep moving forward, when you keep creating, teaching, serving, or speaking life, you show others that age is not a limitation but a platform. You model what it looks like to finish well, to keep pressing toward the prize, to never retire from the mission God has assigned you. If you sense that you have drifted away from your purpose, it is never too late to return. God is not disappointed in you. He is not tallying your failures or scolding you for getting sidetracked. He is gently calling you back, reminding you of the dreams he placed in your heart long before anyone had an opinion about them. He is ready to breathe fresh life into your vision, to renew your strength, and to open doors you thought were permanently closed. Your purpose is not something you have to manufacture from your own strength. It is something you surrender to, trusting that he who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. Purpose can be expressed in countless ways, and it often evolves over time. The form it takes may change, but the essence remains. If you once served in a visible ministry, but now feel called to quietly mentor others, that is still purpose. If you once traveled widely, but now find meaning in writing or praying for others, that is still purpose. If your health limits you in some ways, God will still provide opportunities to make a difference within those limitations. He does not waste any season, and he never requires more from you than what he equips you to give. You must protect your purpose with vigilance. Guard it from the opinions of those who think you have outlived your usefulness. Guard it from your own doubts and insecurities. Guard it from the temptation to settle for a life of passivity. Every time you choose to show up and do the thing God has called you to do, you are making a declaration that your story is not over. You are affirming that your existence still carries holy weight and sacred intention. Purpose is not reserved for the young or the strong. It is for every woman willing to say, God, use me in whatever way you will. When you neglect your purpose, you risk drifting into bitterness and regret. You start to feel disconnected from your own heart. But when you honor your purpose, you tap into a wellspring of joy and fulfillment that no circumstance can take away. You are not here by accident. Your life still matters. Your contribution still matters. You still matter. Never tolerate spiritual complacency, because complacency is the quiet thief that robs you of the vibrant, living relationship God desires with you. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or declare its intentions openly. Instead, it slides into your life like a slow fog, dulling your hunger for God's presence until you hardly realize how much distance has crept between you and your purpose. Spiritual complacency tells you that you already know enough, have done enough, and can coast the rest of the way. It whispers that there is no need to grow, to deepen, or to reach for more of God because you have already arrived. But the truth is, there is never a point in your walk with God when you have seen all there is to see or known all there is to know. He is infinite, and his goodness cannot be exhausted. When you tolerate complacency, you gradually lose the passion that once stirred your soul awake in the early mornings to pray. You forget the awe you felt when you first encountered his love so personally that it brought you to tears. You trade the wonder of faith for predictable rituals that no longer move you. Your spirit was never meant to live on autopilot. It was created to remain alive, responsive, and engaged. Complacency feeds you the lie that growth is only for new believers, for the young, for the ones who still have something to prove. But no matter how long you have walked with God, there is always a deeper place to go, always a fresh revelation waiting, always a higher calling to answer. One of the most dangerous aspects of spiritual complacency is how easily it masquerades as stability. It can look like calm, but underneath it is stagnation. You may still attend church, still read your Bible, still say the right words, but your heart is no longer stirred. You are no longer convicted or challenged. You hear sermons that once would have set your spirit ablaze, and now they barely register. This is how complacency hardens your heart. It convinces you that familiarity is the same as intimacy, but knowing about God is not the same as knowing him. Routine can never be a substitute for relationship. If you allow spiritual complacency to take root, you also begin to lose your sense of urgency for the mission God has entrusted to you. The needs of the world don't seem quite as pressing. The call to serve, to love, to give, to sacrifice feels less compelling. You start to think someone else will take care of it. You start to believe that your part doesn't matter so much anymore. But the moment you disengage from your purpose, you start to shrink your life down to something God never intended, a life centered around your own comfort instead of his kingdom. Complacency also erodes your spiritual resilience. When trials come, and they always do, you may find yourself weaker than you thought, lacking the depth of faith that can only be cultivated through an active, growing relationship with God. A complacent heart is unprepared for spiritual battle because it has not been training. It has not been feeding on the word, seeking his presence, or strengthening itself through prayer. Just as muscles atrophy when not exercised, your faith grows frail when not engaged. Some will say that slowing down spiritually is inevitable as you get older, that the zeal of your youth naturally fades. But age was never meant to be an excuse for indifference. If anything, the longer you have known God, the more reasons you have to be amazed by him. Every year adds more evidence of his faithfulness, more stories of his provision, more gratitude for his grace. The elders in the faith should be the ones whose lives burn the brightest because they have walked with him the longest. Your years are not a liability. They're an asset to your testimony. Complacency can also show up when you start comparing your faith journey to others. You look around and feel satisfied that you're doing enough because someone else is doing less. But God never called you to measure your devotion against other people's standards. He calls you to love him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. All means everything, not merely enough to get by. It is not about checking boxes or meeting a quota of good deeds. It is about cultivating a spirit so surrendered and expectant that you wake up each day asking the Lord, what do you want to do through me today? Never tolerating spiritual complacency also means refusing to let past experiences be the ceiling of your faith. Maybe you have powerful memories of times when God moved in your life, healings, breakthroughs, answered prayers. But those memories, as beautiful as they are, were never meant to be the end of your story. They were meant to build your faith for what he still wants to do. If you only look backward, you risk missing what he is doing right now. God is always at work, always speaking, always inviting you closer. Spiritual complacency is subtle because it often doesn't involve outright sin. You may not be running from God or living in rebellion. You may simply be drifting, growing comfortable, losing your hunger. But drift is danger. No one ends up far from God overnight. It happens gradually, step by a noticed step. You stop seeking him passionately. You stop asking him to search your heart. You stop stretching your faith. Before you realize it, you are living far below the potential he placed inside you. Never tolerating spiritual complacency requires intentional action. It means choosing to keep your heart tender, to stay curious about his ways, to keep pursuing his presence, even when it feels costly or inconvenient to it. It means making space to listen, to be corrected, to be inspired. It means allowing the Holy Spirit to disrupt your routines and stir your spirit. It means remembering that faith is not a static possession. It is a living, dynamic relationship. Guarding against complacency also involves community. Isolation breeds stagnation. When you surround yourself with other believers who are passionate about knowing God, you are less likely to drift. Their hunger ignites your own. Their testimonies remind you that God is still moving. Their prayers uphold you when you feel weary. If you want to stay spiritually alive, stay connected to people who challenge you to grow. Never tolerating complacency is about honoring the price Jesus paid for your freedom. He did not suffer, die, and rise again so you could live half awake to his glory. He called you into abundant life, a life marked by intimacy with him, purpose that stretches you, and joy that overflows. Anything less is an insult to his sacrifice. Every time you feel yourself settling, remind yourself that your story is not finished. There's more revelation, more transformation, more love, more power waiting for you. God has fresh encounters prepared if you will only seek him. Staying spiritually vibrant requires humility, a humility to admit when you've grown dull and the courage to ask God to reignite your passion. No matter how long you have walked this road, there is always more to learn, more to surrender, more to discover about his character. Never be content with what you have already experienced. Instead, let it fuel your desire for what he has yet to reveal. Never tolerate negative influences because the voices you allow into your life have the power to shape your thoughts, your faith, and your destiny. Negative influences rarely announce themselves as threats. They slip in quietly through relationships, media, conversations, and even your own self-talk, gradually eroding your confidence, clouding your judgment, and weakening your spirit. As a woman of God, you have a responsibility to guard your heart with vigilance because what you permit will eventually take root. Over time, those roots can grow into strongholds that are hard to break. It is not an act of pride to protect your peace. It is an act of obedience to the God who has called you to live set apart. Negative influences come in many forms. Sometimes they look like people who continually speak doubt over your dreams, who remind you of your past failures more than your present progress, who belittle your faith or treat your convictions as foolishness. These are the voices that will have you questioning whether God's promises are for you, whether you really heard his call, whether you have the strength to keep going. If you spend enough time around people who see only limitations, you will start to lose sight of possibilities. If you listen to those who see you through the lens of your past mistakes, you will find it hard to believe in the new creation you have become. Other times, negative influences come through what you consume. The media you watch, the books you read, the social feeds you scroll through can saturate your mind with messages that normalize fear, cynicism, comparison, and hopelessness. If you feed your spirit with negativity day after day, it will eventually leak into your words and actions. You cannot fill your mind with toxic narratives and expect your faith to stay strong. You must be intentional about what you allow into your heart, because your thoughts are the soil where your beliefs grow. One of the most dangerous forms of negative influence is the critical spirit. Whether it comes from others or from within, criticism that tears down rather than builds up can become a constant soundtrack in your mind. You start to rehearse every shortcoming, every flaw, every way you don't measure up. You become so familiar with the voice of condemnation that you begin to mistake it for truth. But God never speaks to you in the voice of shame. He convicts to heal and restore, not to accuse and destroy. If you tolerate a critical spirit, whether from yourself or others, you will live under a weight that God never intended for you to carry. Negative influences can also disguise themselves as well-meaning advice. People who do not share your values or understand your calling may try to steer you away from your purpose. They may urge you to play it safe, to lower your standards, to compromise in ways that seem small, but eventually lead you far from the path God has set before you. It can feel easier in the moment to go along with them, to avoid conflict or keep the peace. But every time you agree to something that violates you or convicts yourself to settle for less, you begin to dull your spiritual discernment, and soon you can no longer hear God's voice above the noise of everyone else's opinions. You were not created to be shaped by the world. You were created to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That transformation requires you to draw clear boundaries around what you will and will not allow to influence you. Boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They are fences built out of wisdom. They are the lines you draw to protect the sacred place where your faith grows, where your identity is formed, where your relationship with God thrives. Never tolerating negative influences means you must be willing to make hard choices about who you spend time with. Not everyone who has access to you deserves influence over you. Some relationships, while familiar or comfortable, are not healthy. You can love people without letting them lead you. You can show kindness without surrendering your peace. You can honor others without sacrificing your own well-being. It is not ungodly to step away from relationships that continually pull you into negativity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance, to give yourself space to heal, to grow, and to hear God clearly. It also means being honest about your own patterns of thought. Sometimes the most persistent negative influence comes not from others, but from the narratives you repeat to yourself. The stories that say you are unworthy, that you will never change, that you are too old or too broken to make a difference. Those stories are lies. And the only way to silence them, replace them with the truth of who God says you are. You are chosen, loved, equipped, and forgiven. You have a purpose that cannot be revoked. You have value that cannot be diminished by anyone's opinion, not even your own. One of the reasons God tells you to renew your mind daily is because he knows how easily negativity can creep in and take hold. Just as you would not let weeds overrun a garden you have carefully planted, you must not allow negative influences to choke out the fruit of the Spirit in your life. Guard your joy, guard your hope, guard your faith. These are treasures that must be protected. When you decide to never tolerate negative influences, you will often be misunderstood. Some will accuse you of being judgmental or unkind, But setting boundaries is not about judging others. It is about stewarding your heart. You are responsible for the atmosphere you create in your mind and spirit. You are accountable for the environment you cultivate around you. If you want to live in peace, you must be intentional about removing anything that steals it. There will be times when you have no choice but to be in environments that are less than uplifting. You may have family, workplace, or community obligations that expose you to negativity you cannot fully avoid. In those situations, you can still choose how you respond. You can decide not to internalize the criticism, not to adopt the fear, not to engage in the gossip or complaining. You can become so rooted in God's truth that the negativity around you cannot penetrate the peace within you. One of the most powerful declarations you can make over your life is that you will no longer tolerate what drains you of your purpose, joy, and faith. This commitment will require vigilance, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. You may have to let go of relationships you thought you couldn't live without. You may have to change habits that feel comforting but are ultimately destructive. You may have to walk away from environments where you no longer belong. But every time you do, you create more space for God's voice to lead you and for His Spirit to renew you. Never tolerating negative influences also means choosing to fill your life with what is good, noble, pure, and true. It means seeking out voices that inspire you, friends who encourage you, mentors who challenge you, and practices that draw you closer to God. It means being intentional about the books you read, the music you listen to, the conversations you entertain. You were not meant to simply avoid darkness. You were meant to shine light. The more you fill your heart with truth, the less room there is for lies to take hold. The influences you allow shape the person you become. If you surround yourself with faith, hope, and love, you will grow in faith, hope, and love. If you continually expose yourself to negativity, fear, and doubt, those things will eventually color the way you see yourself, others, and God. You cannot thrive in an environment that suffocates your spirit. You must be willing to choose differently, to live intentionally, and to protect the precious gift of your faith as you walk forward into this season of your life. Remember that you are a woman of God, called to stand firm in your purpose, your dignity, and your faith. Never tolerate disrespect because you are worthy of honor. Never neglect your purpose because God's calling on your life has no expiration date. Never allow spiritual complacency because your relationship with Him is meant to grow deeper every day. Never accept negative influence because your heart is too valuable to be shaped by anything less than His truth. You have come too far and learned too much to settle for anything that diminishes who you are or what you were created to do. Keep your standards high, your spirit engaged, and your faith alive, trusting that God will meet you in every step with strength, grace, and unshakable love.